2025 at 7 p.m. And since it's 7 p.m., we can proceed with the roll call.
Member Bacha?
Here.
Member Devlin?
Here.
Member Duncan?
Here.
Member Byzenko?
Here.
Member Tominello?
Here.
Chair Murray is absent. And Member O'Parker here.
Is there an approval of tonight's agenda?
Make a motion to approve. Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So approval of the agenda passes. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes from February 20th, 2025?
The motion to approve.
I'll support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So it looks like the next item would skip down to E, unfinished business. Madam Secretary, will you announce it?
Case number 02-25S, Twin Oaks, 24645 and 24629 Old Shook Road. This is for a multifamily development for two separate duplexes consisting of 4 units.
So Adam, I was hoping that we'd have the screen and you could show us the renderings of the outside. Is that not possible?
This evening does not appear to be working.
Okay. Do you have a copy of them we can look at?
So the renderings
I do not.
from the outside, yes, let me pull those open. So if you recall, this project appeared before us, I think was it the last meeting or 2 meetings ago?
Not
3
the
or 4
last
meetings
meeting,
ago.
yeah, because
2
I
meetings ago.
don't think I was here for it either.
The original plan set that they submitted that time around had the renderings. I do have them up on my computer if you'd like to see. I did confirm with the applicant that the proposed architectural drawings did not change at all from that first time around. We didn't have any comments or concerns or any requested revisions on those, on the floor plans or the architectural renderings.
Okay. Is that still the case with everybody? No comments?
Good with me.
Okay. Would you like to then go through your letter?
Yes, so the applicant has submitted a revised site plan, and I would like to share the key changes that were incorporated on this revised site plan. They did now specify the floor area for each unit, 960 square feet. That does meet our minimum requirements for the zoning ordinance. They did reduce the distance between the two duplex structures. Previously between them it was 60 feet, they reduced it to 51.44 feet. This allowed for an increase in the rear yard setback. So that, the rear yard setback was previously at just over 41, and now it's 50 feet. The ordinance requires a 60-foot separation between buildings and a 50-foot rear yard setback. They went to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then last week they were granted the variance to allow for the below 60 feet between buildings. They are now showing a parking pad sized for 2 parking spaces that would be designated as basically like a shared or guest parking area for the 4 units. The end of the concrete driveway has been reconfigured to include a T turnaround. They're now showing a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk along the Old Shook Road frontage. They're now proposing a privacy fence along the eastern property line, essentially to the extent that this property is adjacent to a single-family dwelling on that adjacent property to the east. They are now showing a small garbage enclosure on a concrete pad for each unit. Each unit now has shown a patio space toward the back of each unit. They did, on the site plan, they updated it with the parking requirements schedule. They added notes about exterior lighting, essentially saying that no on-site lighting will be present except for the building-mounted lights. They added a note to the site plan indicating that no existing trees will be removed. They included a separate landscape plan sheet and plant description chart. They're showing some additional landscaping proposed around the duplex buildings, essentially foundation plantings. Additional trees are proposed in the northwestern corner of the property, and they did add notes with regard to a commitment toward maintenance of the landscaping, not just short-term, but over time.
So can I ask you about your note number 1, that indicating that the trees were to be removed?
Yes.
So did I just hear you say that that's been resolved?
So, yeah, there is the note in the site plan that indicates no trees will be removed, but there are labels on certain trees on the site plan indicating that the trees will be removed.
Right.
I did have a conversation with the applicant earlier this week. In fact, he had shared a revised site plan with me, just showing that he had no problems making that change. So he, on that revised site plan, removed those essentially those labels were in error, and they do in fact not intend to remove any trees.
Okay, so we could address that by approving subject to...
Subject to
Removal
essentially
of
that
this.
revised site plan being submitted to the township for our review, and we can sign off on that.
Okay, as well as any other potential
Yes.
revisions that
Yep.
we discussed.
Regarding my second point in the letter, the privacy fence, I had suggested that you would ask for more detail about the material, the color, the height of that privacy fence. They are going to be proposing a 6-foot tall solid vinyl privacy fence, and I believe the applicant has a specification sheet that he can share with you. My third comment was with regard to each of the 4 units is shown as having a garbage enclosure. So I wasn't sure if that is that a fence enclosure, so I think the applicant can speak to that as well. The fourth comment, so in the zoning ordinance, we require, of course, the sidewalk along the frontage, which they've now provided on this revised plan. But the zoning ordinance also calls for an on-site sidewalk as a means of connecting the principal buildings with the road frontage sidewalk. Essentially wanting you to consider how can people get from the sidewalk along the road to this development. So that's something you can ask the applicant about. We do see, clearly this is a 4-unit complex. They are providing the asphalt drive. That's kind of a dead-end drive. There's no chance that it would be extended further. Maybe you could consider the unit owner simply using that as their safe and easy means of access to the frontage sidewalk. Otherwise, the alternative could be a sidewalk that would connect to all 4 doors, I suppose. But these units are not oriented to the street. They're actually oriented to the east. Their front doors are. In discussing this with the applicant, he's hopeful that you might not require the sidewalks all the way into the site to each door, instead allowing the actual driveway for the units to serve in that regard. And then the last comment that I had was with regard to just making sure that there's a sign by those 2 guest parking spaces designated that they are shared spaces or guest spaces. In the revised site plan that he did share with me by email, it does show a sign that would designate those as guest spaces. He also confirmed that one of my questions was, had anything changed with the architectural proposal or the floor plans for any of the units? And he confirmed that nothing has changed since they originally submitted the site plan for your review. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
Yep. Would the applicant care to address any of the comments of the planner? Please state your name an address for the minutes?
My name is Mike Greenwood. My address is 14618 Blossom Drive, Washington Township.
Gerald Gapshus, 14677, 26 Mile Road, Washington Township.
So do you want to address the question, or, the comments of the planner, and then maybe explain what you've given us?
Well, for the privacy fence, that's the detail that we're looking to use between properties. That would be 6 foot. Use that around the garbage enclosures and for the privacy between the patios. The garbage enclosures could be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. Those fences come in that height. Obviously, the privacy would be 6. For the garbage cans, 4 to 5 feet would probably be used. I don't see the necessity for 6 feet, but we'd use the same product, consistent through the development. Let's see. The trees, the note about the trees, that was a mistake by the designer. It got left in there, so we had that removed, as Adam stated, and we've shown that on the new site plan. I believe that we just talked about the fence, garbage enclosure. The on-site sidewalk, we believe with the access, where it's located on Old Shook, it's a dead-end street. There's only one house to the east. There's one gentleman that lives there. There's going to be very little traffic. Pretty much that gentleman and whoever's living in the units. So with the low vehicular traffic, we believe that we'd like to ask the commission, the planning commission, to consider waiving that requirement based on the proximity of this project and minimal traffic and access from the drives.
But just so I understand what you're asking for, you've already agreed to place a sidewalk along the frontage. This is just connecting that frontage sidewalk to the unit doors?
Yes, but the way this is, it's hard, this was an issue for me at the ZBA as well. So the way it's presented, it's oriented, it's not gonna do it, but it's oriented this way. So the frontage is on, is there, and the doors are opposite. So if you look, you'd have to be like crossing over driveways to get a sidewalk to the, so it would be having to cross over the driveway to get the sidewalk anywhere, and they'd still be using their driveway, which they could use now to get to there, so.
And the
I get why
driveways
they're
would be
asking.
full of cars, right? The driveways would be full of cars because that's the,
But they also have this whole concrete, that's just their drive into their unit. So I guess I don't know where you would even put a walkway from each door, because they'd have to go in front of their garage.
And the driveways
So I
are,
don't know if there's a solution, is what I'm saying. So the sidewalk's gonna go here.
and the driveway is going to be 16 foot wide, so it really can only accommodate one car in the driveway. So it won't be 2 cars. So one in the garage, one in the driveway, and then the extra spaces that are provided.
The doors are facing like that. So, like, there's the walkway.
Madam Chair.
Right to the door.
I really don't see the purpose of making them put a sidewalk in. It really isn't serving but 4 units, so.
just the residents, right?
We've got the wider drives, we've got, people are gonna walk the street anyways, for what, a dead end? I don't have any problem with that.
Does it matter to the commission whether or not these are owner occupied or not? If they're rental, then are we creating a problem?
I just don't see how there's a solution, I guess, without reconfiguring everything to put the door on in another location. Otherwise, I mean, I guess you could put, but then you'd still be using that as, because this is the front door. So to get to this sidewalk here,
This is just to the driveway.
so this goes to the driveway, and then you'd have to come across.
So where,
Keeping
I
coming
think this is what
across.
I believe.
That looked
So Adam, does it show on the site plan where the sidewalk that they agreed to put, does it show the one that they agreed to?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's along Old Shook frontage. Yeah, so again, if you're looking at the site plan, north is to the right. So they're showing along the southern property line.
Yeah.
That's what was messing me up.
84 foot wide, or 84 foot long sidewalk along Old Shook. So the question is just, is there safe
there's no
pedestrian
connection.
access from each unit to the sidewalk that
Yes.
they're proposing along Old
Are
Shook?
we okay with them using the driveway in place of the sidewalk, I guess is the question.
And I would also agree, with the comments that are being shared. With only 4 units being served by that driveway, it seems that there wouldn't be any safety hazard for the owners to walk along the driveway to get
So
to the
it'll
frontage
ultimately
sidewalk.
connect to that side.
And no possibility for more.
Yeah, I don't really, the complications of trying to get a sidewalk that connects to every unit. It'll cross each driveway, or you could put it on the other side of Twin Oaks Drive, but then they'd have to cross Twin Oaks Drive each time, and probably people wouldn't even use it,
Right,
because it'd just be quicker to walk
Walk the street.
the street.
okay. Any other comments? Anybody else on this issue? Okay, I guess I'm a little biased just because I have the misfortune to live on a street without sidewalks, and I hate it. But it is a through street. It's not a dead end like this, so.
I would agree with you, Danielle, but I guess since I spent the whole zoning board meeting looking at this, and it was probably the only time we ever had residents in the room for a zoning board issue, we got like a lot of these, we went through a lot of this, and really there's only that one house at the end, of Old Shook there as well, so even the sidewalk along Old Shook, it's nice that it's there. You could also just walk on Old Shook
Okay.
without seeing the 1 or 4 cars that like.
Does any of the commission have any questions for the developers?
Yeah, I got a quick one. To the far north, at the end of Twin Oaks Drive, you have an L shape there, which I assume is intended to assist in turning around.
Correct. So the fire marshal had 3 concerns that we addressed, and one of those was, I met with the fire marshal to work out that as a turnaround.
Gotcha. What strategies have you considered that would mitigate the risk that just becomes additional parking, that people will have cars staged there, and then you've lost your turnaround capacity?
We'll probably address that with signage, like no parking.
That's something we could say for, emergency vehicles only, signage. It could be posted, that could be put there just as we put for the parking, the signage that Adam requested for the residents and guests. So we could do signage there. That's a good question, a great question, because it's true. Residents would say, oh, or a guest, probably not the residents, but living
Yeah,
there.
guest,
But
right.
a guest would say, hey, I'm going to use this. If there's a sign, then they could get ticketed, correct? So,
Is that the case? I was gonna say.
So that can be handled through the enforcement process as well. So the signage is acceptable. If parking is to be found there, I would handle it through the enforcement process, ticketing and towing and stuff of that nature.
Anybody else? I have a comment on the landscaping. So for the areas of the buildings that are south-facing, you have designated in your landscape plan plants that are shade-loving. Heuchera and ajuga are shade-loving. Hydrangea also, depending on the variety, is a shade-loving plant. So on the areas, the planting beds that are south-facing, you may wish to reconsider.
Yeah, like the south side of the garage wall, is that what you're referring to?
Yes,
Okay. I can pass that on to the landscape architect that drew this.
I mean, there's some varieties of Heuchera coral bells that would be more sun tolerant, but otherwise they're a really good shade plant.
Okay.
So I'm not suggesting that you revise it, I'm just bringing it up for
Yeah.
your information
Future
because,
maintenance and plants, yeah, that don't survive because they're too much sun.
or they fail to thrive more often and they stay very little.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved mine 4 times before I decided it liked the amount of sun and grew.
Okay.
Does anybody have any comments on the garbage enclosures? Is 4 to 5 feet tall of this material acceptable?
I have no problem with it.
I think I'm good with that. I'm assuming they're just gonna be like roll-away dump bins.
Correct. Those are,
Everybody else is allowed to keep them not shielded, so.
Yeah.
I think it's an improvement.
Well, if there's nothing else?
No.
I'd entertain a motion.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Motion to approve case 02-25-S, or South Twin Oaks at 24645 and 24629 Old Shook, with the following conditions. The applicant submits a revised site plan to the township with corrections on the tree removal. Privacy fences, I don't have any problems, so that's not going to be in the motion. The installation of an emergency parking only sign at the end of the road, and approve as submitted without the sidewalk going out to Old Shook Road, being that it's a dead-end street, limited traffic, almost no traffic, and it really doesn't serve a purpose.
Is there a second?
Support.
So on the question, should we clarify in the motion that the fencing as presented is acceptable and should be included on the revised site plan?
I have no problem with it as submitted, so,
Yeah, so
Right.
that's what,
yep.
okay. You revised your second, okay.
Yes.
I don't need a roll call, right? Or do we?
You don't need to do a roll call. You may do a roll call.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. So please submit a revised site plan for review.
absolutely.
You could be in touch with Melody for any other requirements.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, number F, new business, or letter F, sorry.
I do that all the time, too. Number
Number
B. Okay, included in your packet was information with regard to the zoning amendments that we are starting to look at. These are housing-focused zoning amendments. As mentioned in my cover memorandum, this is part of this grant that we had secured to work on zoning ordinance amendments. The timing was perfect, really, just finishing up our master plan at the end of the last year. And there are a number of recommendations in the master plan that speak to zoning specifically and also speak to housing. And so, yeah, this project was great timing. So we started to look at the zoning ordinance. We have provided a couple of things for you just to discuss this evening. I thought the best way, there's a lot in the packet. We could probably spend quite a bit of time there. I kind of wanted to maybe just present it to you, and I would pose some questions to you, some big questions that I have, or maybe some of the big findings maybe that are included in here to see if we're on the right track, or if you agree or disagree, or kind of looking for your direction as we move forward. So if you flip to that matrix chart, kind of the color-coded table there. So I think this is kind of helpful talking point here. So what we've done by creating this table for you is, you can see at the top row is all of the currently established zoning districts in Harrison Township. And on the left side are all of the residential uses, residential development options, or residential care facilities that are presently listed in the zoning ordinance and what zoning district they are allowed in, if they're allowed in any of the districts. So if it's in black font, that means it's current language currently in the zoning ordinance right now. And you can see if it's listed as a P, that means it's permitted use by right. If it's an S, it means it's a special land use in that particular district. And then in red are potential changes based on our review of the zoning ordinance, based on, in part, the master plan recommendations, and then just in general kind of our professional kind of findings as we reviewed the zoning ordinance. So the first thing that you see there is that kind of the red X over the R1 district. So if you're, and I apologize, I should have included the zoning map as one of the attachments. The R1 zoning district, on your zoning map, it's the dark green. And presently there are only a handful of properties that are designated R1. It includes the Metro Park properties. And really, other than that, it includes the Gawaney Golf Course property. It officially is a residential zoning district, yet we don't have any residential properties that are actually zoned R1 district. In the master plan, we had suggested that for the Gawaney Golf Course and for the Metro Park and maybe some other wetland lands or other properties that simply couldn't be developed for residential use, that we establish a parks or an open space conservation zoning district. And really kind of striking out the R1 district and renaming it as the conservation and open space district is the easy way to do that. And we can even take out residential use as an allowable use within that zone, because again, there aren't any properties that have a residential use, so we wouldn't be creating a non-conforming use or anything like that. And really, these are properties that don't have the capacity to even have a residential use, nor do we really want them to turn residential. So that's one thing. If you have any particular gut reaction to that this is the wrong direction, let me know.
Do you have a map of those ones that you would like open space?
Well, no, I don't.
Is
That
there
would be
input for that?
one of the things that we'll be looking at later is, do we want to make any zoning map changes in light of the recently adopted future land use plan? Haven't gotten that far at this point, but that's on the to-do list to at least review and consider if any changes are necessary. So at that time, we could take a look at that.
We could take some action.
Sure. Yeah.
So with that proposed change, so Guani, for instance, if it ceases to be a golf course at some time, which many of them are
Right.
nowadays.
Yep.
So that would mean that any current or future owner would have to come in and apply for a zoning change.
Correct.
Or potentially a PUD
Correct.
to develop it as single family.
Yes.
And we're okay with that.
Of course, at that time, if that would happen, or we're aware that that might be happening, or it's even on the, on the horizon, we could initiate our own change to a district that we would want, even on their behalf to do it, so that they don't have to do it on their own. But they could always come and ask for a change at that time.
Okay, because that scenario doesn't seem to me to be too far out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Though if I read correctly, ROS still allows for development. It's a
Correct.
less dense,
Yes.
that's all it is.
Very much so.
Yeah, I think it's still allowed for a PUD.
A planned unit development would be allowed with it as a special use in that district. That's true. So they wouldn't need a rezoning if they did planned unit development.
I mean, I'm not arguing against it, I'm just
Yeah.
wanted to point it out. But that would be, I think,
That's
beneficial.
what I was going to say.
I mean, it's pretty common to have your parkland on your zoning map designated
As a recreation
Park.
or
Yeah,
public.
And I guess I never even noticed, and like, a lot of people question that huge wetland parcel that
The township property.
owns and think like, there was a sewer project going on, and then all of a sudden, I can't remember if it was here or zoning board, people were like, they're gonna build houses there, and it was like,
Yeah.
they're improving their drainage.
yeah.
Yeah, that property certainly would be a candidate for this district.
It gives it extra layer of protection, I think, because then there has to be that public process before anything of such a greater density could happen.
The next question that I had for you is with regard to accessory dwelling units. So is everyone familiar with what an accessory dwelling unit is?
It's in style right now.
It's in style right now, it's where usually you might convert it to detached garage or I guess an attached garage and maybe create some loft space. It could be a, small kitchen, bathroom, sleeping area, be a separate and distinct unit. Some people like to have that as, maybe they like to gain secondary income by renting that unit out. It also comes up sometimes from people who might want to have, think of a family member who needs care, having your parents or something like that who, on your site so you can keep a closer eye on them, but also they're not up in your business inside your house, so they have a separate and distinct unit. Maybe your child who just won't leave the house and you want to put them in the garage kind of a thing. So, these are, I guess I didn't ask the question to like Brent and Melody. I don't know if you get calls or people asking about this in Harrison Township. I don't know that that's the case necessarily. And of course, this does have an impact, and if you would allow this, you're talking about potentially allowing a second dwelling unit on one property, increasing density, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, parking.
Parking, absolutely. Other concerns that people sometimes cite is, well, what if, the unit or the principal dwelling is a rental and then they're just going to have a second one on there, so you have two rentals on one property, and, who's going to control, how's that going to, turn out?
I don't feel comfortable
Well, we
adding
don't-
something like that, but that's me.
We don't address it at all, though, in our.
It's not addressed, well, in the sense that our ordinance only allows a single-family dwelling on one property.
Yeah.
It's essentially prohibited right now.
Could you do an accessory dwelling and state they're only allowed on X size parcel in that zoning district? Like
Certainly, you could.
2 acres
You
or
could come up
whatever
with
it might be,
standards.
which we might not have,
Yep.
but
You can come up with standards and say that, you'd have to meet the minimum square footage for any lot, and then an additional, however many square feet you'd want. Maybe double it. Maybe it needs to be twice the size of of the minimum. And in that sense, you're not really increasing density, because you'd need to have double the size property in order to accommodate that. So there's A lot of
Enough
communities
parking.
have done something like that,
I'd
if they
be
choose to even allow this.
interested in doing some research on like how other communities address this, just because like
Sure.
Danielle said, this is a
Sure.
trending thing that seems to be coming up. And I imagine this happens where Danielle lives and where I live in that part of the township where we have the bigger lots and a lot of homes with detached garages. And you can even see in the waterfront area, people who put lots above their garage.
So people are
One on
doing it.
South River Road. So my thing is, if people are doing this and we're not addressing it, does it make it easier if we put some regulations around it versus just saying, waiting for there to be ordinance issues or enforcement issues?
Another concern, and certainly in a
point.
waterfront community, the thought is that, oh, if you allow these accessory dwelling units, people are gonna start renting them out, and it's gonna become a short-term rental, you know, and that
Yeah.
could be an issue as well.
That's my concern, right? Especially being right by the water and having all the, all the recreation that we have. Just sort of saying, okay, Airbnb, come on in.
Mhm.
So I don't, personally, I don't see why we need to go there. I think we got to cover, but that's just me.
Well, maybe we could, like Amanda said, do some research and see if there is a district where it might be appropriate, where the lot area is larger. Most of the waterfront property does not have a
Enough.
large lot area.
Yeah, it's not big enough to accommodate one. probably, in
Right.
the first place. I can do some, I can get you some sample regulations from other communities, maybe give thought to what standards you could even consider, and then, just present that to you, and we can maybe, continue the conversation about it.
Yeah, I'd be interested too in looking at the other waterfront communities in Macomb County
Okay.
to see if any of them address it.
Hey, Adam,
Yes.
does the township have an ordinance that requires each dwelling to have its own water and sewer?
So that's
So-
another thing that would be, we would want to engage with our Public Works Department to see their feelings about something like this. Would they want a separate, meter, separate leads from that unit to the main line? Or, I would think so.
Yeah.
As opposed to allowing, especially if it's going to be rented out, that could cause a major issue.
Yeah, that seems to be pretty common practice, that you have to have an independent,
Right.
at least all the years I've been doing this, so. All right, thank you.
So I can bring you back more information about this and regulations in similar communities, if they're allowing these, and if so, what their regulations are. Another thing that I wanted to just share with you is the RM1 district and a couple of the potential changes that you can consider. Coming from the master plan, as you may recall, there was the sentiment that, in particular, we had created in the master plan what we called, I think it was townhouse residential, or attached/townhouse future land use classification. It essentially encompassed a lot of the properties that are presently zoned RM1 district today. And we had heard that we wanted to try and limit the future development of conventional multiple family apartment buildings and, things of that nature. And so the thought was, well, maybe we can allow smaller, limited, townhouse or attached units in lieu of conventional apartment buildings. So this proposal here for the RM1 is attempting to do this, where we could allow in that district as a principal use, attached dwellings, townhouses or stacked, or just whatever you want to call them, but maybe limiting them to not more than 4 attached units in any structure. And then only allowing the multiple family apartment style as maybe a special land use in the RM1 district, as opposed to a permitted use where it is allowed right now. Or maybe even considering and not allowing the conventional multiple family at all in that zoning district, just allowing single family, 2 family, and kind of the attached residential up to 4 units.
Well, I think a map would be very useful
Sure.
to this discussion.
Sure.
So,
that we can see, yep.
And see where you have them, because if you change that, then all the ones that are existing are then non-conforming.
Right, and so that's something that we looked at in the master plan too, is like, we were careful to show in this townhouse attached future land use category, properties that are actually that style of development. It did line up pretty well with the current zoning for RM1. But we can certainly, I can provide you with, the zoning map so we can, our consideration can be informed by that, for sure.
can they show parcels on them as well?
Yeah. So that's kind of a substantial change. It is coming as a recommendation from the master plan. So other than that, any specific concerns about this, or are we okay with at least considering what this might look like?
Any comments?
Nothing at this time.
Another thing that I wanted to point out in this matrix here is the idea, and this also was included in the master plan, that maybe in some of our non-residential districts, that we may want to consider the potential, at least for housing. The local commercial district right now, the general commercial district, and the waterfront district in particular, neither one of those districts allow any form of housing. I'm sorry, the waterfront does allow a single-family dwelling as a special land use. So one recommendation from the master plan is that we could consider maybe in a mixed-use building in one of those districts, say upper floor residential uses, loft apartments, or whatever you would want to call it, potentially as a special land use in that district. So a business owner or a property owner in the waterfront, general commercial, local commercial, could submit a special land use for you to consider a mixed-use building that includes residential on the upper floors.
What would an estimate be of what's buildable space in this community, even left anymore? I mean, we're an older community.
Yeah.
Other than going in and tearing stuff down that's already up to build, how much, are we talking 5%?
So I probably ask how many commercial buildings in existence today are actually two-story, where the upper story could be converted to residential. Probably that it's a low number. But in the V1 or the V1A district, for example, you have many one-story commercial buildings, and this would give them the potential to have a second story, which is allowed per the height with residential use.
And spruce it up.
Do we,
Spruce it up.
don't we already allow that in B1A, or we don't?
In the V1A, we do.
Okay.
But an example maybe would be the local commercial district or even the waterfront district. Now, this is something where I know that we have had people, marina owners, ask about the potential. How can we integrate more residential or some residential into maybe our larger marina property?
Encourage anything we can do to get them in here to get it cleaned up.
So when we had that small PUD come
Yeah,
before us
that's
on
right.
North River Road, would this have helped that, or?
Yes, so that's one of the things too with this whole not more than 4 attached units idea. You can see there that maybe having that as a special land use in the residential waterfront and the waterfront district. If we had that, I think that development could probably have happened. It may not have been as many units as they wanted. I think what did they want?
7?
7.
or 8?
So maybe they could have gotten 3 and 3 or 2 and 3 or something like that.
Those were detached, I thought.
I thought
they
they
were
were all
attached.
They were attached.
Yeah.
I thought it was
They
like
were
7 or 8
townhomes, weren't they?
attached.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have been able to get 7 attached, but they could have gotten, 3 and 3, 2 buildings.
It was just a really unique development that
Mhm.
could have cleaned up that parcel quite a bit.
Well, I tend to agree with Commissioner Duncan that that could be an opportunity for, redevelopment that would be on the positive side rather than allowing the same old deferred maintenance type of structures.
If you go to the next page, still in the table, but the next page, I just wanted to highlight these aren't really uses, but these are residential development options. There are two options that are currently in the zoning ordinance. One is the planned unit development option. We're all fairly familiar with that. The second current option is called residential open space development option. The last time that this came through the township was the Brigantine second phase that they got approval for but never proceeded with. That allowed for smaller, detached, it's still a site condominium of detached single-family homes, but they were on smaller lots, and then I think 60-70% of the property was proposed to be open space. The one thing that the minimum open space on that was 50% for this option, and it also does not allow for the attaching of units. The one thing that you could consider is maybe having a residential clustering option, which is pretty common, where you might allow on a much larger single-family development, maybe a percentage of the units, maybe not more than 25% of the total units in this complex could be attached units. So that could be an option. It also would be, probably it would require, a minimum open space, community benefits of that regard. Public hearings would be required, that kind of a thing. But it just is another option for a developer, depending on the context and the setting of that site, could propose something like that for the township.
And an option for us to review it.
Yes,
And have
right.
control over what happens.
Right. So unless you're completely against that idea, I could at least put something on paper just for you to see what that might look like.
I'm open to it. I just think that it's only going to be one or two
Yeah,
properties that
yeah,
might be
not a lot.
applicable. But
Yeah.
it also helps us if we do get one or two properties that might apply to, that we do have
Yeah.
a little more flexibility or a couple more options besides just
Yep.
maybe going plan unit development and it's under
Yep.
the 40 acres and then we're back to the same.
That is also
Yeah.
something that I haven't done the review, but I'd like to present maybe some tweaks or changes within the two existing development options. The acreage requirement for plain unit development is one. It just doesn't make sense for Harrison Township. So looking for other unnecessary hurdles to somebody being able to even propose something like that to us. And then,
That's gonna be my next question.
yeah. And then lastly, you'll see a number of recommendations within the care facilities, like the daycare, child daycare, in-home daycare, adult foster care, in-home, and then kind of the congregate care, and then the other types of assisted living facilities, things of that nature. So, it's kind of a moving target with all of these definitions and terms that are used. Most of these facilities, almost all of them on the list are licensed through the state, and so the state has definitions and that kind of a thing. One of the things that our ordinance does not address that it should, because state law says that these should be allowed, is the adult foster care. State law says that in a residential area, we can't prevent the small, the adult foster care family home, which is a capacity of 6 or less within a home. That's state licensed, and the Zoning Enabling Act says that they shall be treated like any other single family dwelling. No special treatment, no special approvals or anything like that. The other types of adult foster care facilities, including a home that could accommodate between 7 and 12, or a home, in-home, that could accommodate 13 to 20, these can be regulated as a special land use. We're suggesting that the 7 to 12 could be allowed in our residential districts, but as a special land use. The 13 to 20, only the multiple family districts, and then the congregate care facility, which would probably look and feel like an assisted living facility, only in our multiple family districts. So really, we're just kind of bringing it up to speed with contemporary terms, and state laws that tell us what we can and can't do with these facilities. So in the draft, the pages that follow, and I I won't go through each one of the line items, but you'll see essentially the potential changes that are outlined here, incorporated the actual amendment language that would accomplish what it's showing here.
Have we, has Brent or the building for code enforcement seen anything or made any
Not yet.
suggestions?
I
Okay.
haven't, but I certainly want to engage with Brent and intend to. In the packet of information, maybe I could just kind of share highlights with you and ask you to take a look on your own, reading material when you're looking for something fun to read, right?
It's only 205 pages, come on.
That's the whole ordinance.
It's only 74. And it's not very boring.
I've only provided to you
A bunch of
the
pictures.
pages that actually have
Oh.
proposed changes.
I just saw 205 up here, I'm like, okay.
But at the same time, there's still more work to do, and I'm only giving you kind of an initial set. So you'll see as you scroll through on page 80 of 205, that's the potential language for this, getting rid of the R1, but changing it to a recreation and open space conservation district. And given that we wouldn't allow homes there, and now it's just kind of park and public and semi-public facilities, appropriate changes in that regard, including a new intent statement on page 81, and then some tweaks to the uses that would be allowed in that ROS district. Starting on page 82, so as you know, we have 4 single-family residential zoning districts currently in the ordinance: R1A, B, C, and D. R1A is the most restrictive, minimum lot area of 12,000 square feet, minimum lot width of 100 feet. So for each of these 4 districts, because one of the things that we had talked about during the master planning process was, and this has come up very often, is like, we have some really, really small lots. Our zoning districts in line with established development patterns in the township. And so what we've done, just using, GIS information kind of at the end of each district heading here. So this first comment box is at the top of page 84. At the top of page 84, I've got a Wade Trim commentary there. Does everyone see that? Mm-hmm. All right, so for the R1A district, there are 585 total parcels zoned R1A in Harrison Township. The mean parcel size is 19,000, almost 20,000 square feet. 132 parcels zoned R1A do not meet the minimum lot size, 12,000 square feet, so 22%. These parcels are concentrated along the riverfront. So R1A zoned properties along the riverfront, a number of these are found there. And then one neighborhood, southeast of Prentice and Helzer, that entire neighborhood is zoned R1A, and the lots are between 8,200 and 9,600 square feet. So you could easily fix the non-conforming lots by maybe considering a change from R1A to R1C or D for just that particular area. And you'd fix, maybe half of those undersized parcels. So I've kind of done that analysis for each of the 4 single-family districts. Now the next one is the R1B, so on page 86. The minimum lot area is 10,800 square feet. The minimum lot width is 90. There are 1,400 parcels zoned R1B presently. Only 120. That's a typo. 120 parcels zoned R1B are less than 10,800 square feet. So less than 10% are non-conforming. And there is really, most of those are just in a couple of small areas. So potentially, those two small areas could be candidates to downzone to, say, R1C to eliminate some of those. But overall, 8.4% is not bad. R1C, so this would be the bottom of page 88. Yeah, minimum lot area is 9,600 square feet, 2,800 parcels zoned R1C, 1,100, almost 1,200 are less than 9,600 square feet right now. So that's 41% are non-conforming lots. These areas are concentrated in the Jefferson Villa neighborhood. That's St. Christopher, Anchorage, Magdalena Streets.
Sure.
Point Rosa, so Point Rosa, Terramar, Villamar, Malist, Cherry Streets. South of South River Road, Wilmarth, Prentice, Camp, and Chart Streets. And then many of the parcels in St. Clair Haven, that's the one along the lakeshore. If we were to reduce the minimum lot area of the R1C district from 9,600 to 8,400, that would make approximately 350 properties become conforming. If we were to reduce the minimum lot area to 7,200 square feet, about 1/6 of an acre, that would make 800 properties approximately conforming. And of course, or we could consider some of those concentrated neighborhoods that have a lot of undersized lots. Maybe we could turn them to R1D, and that might solve some of the issues there as well.
So the reason that we don't want to just leave it is if, say, one of them were destroyed beyond 50%, then they could not rebuild without.
So in all likelihood, although, we're talking about a lot that is non-conforming, and that we can't prevent them from building on a non-conforming lot, but if they have two properties that they own, it essentially forces them to combine them. Mm-hmm. And we've had that situation where it's like, well, all of their neighbors don't have to do that, and it's house after house after house, and then why do we force this neighbor, who is unfortunate that they happen to own two adjacent properties?
But it's two approaches, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one approach is forcing them to come into compliance with the ideal
Right.
of the zoning district, and the other approach that you've presented is changing the ideal
Right.
of the
To
zoning
match
district.
what's established. Generally more what's established.
So if we all agree that what's established is just fine, then it makes sense to change it.
And that's kind of the thinking, like if what's established is acceptable, why would we?
No, that makes sense.
Add a
I think-
burden.
I think that's logical. I do.
And that's the question, I guess, that the planning commission should consider over this time.
Yep.
Is, when we get the map and take a look at those
Yep.
neighborhoods and decide if that is acceptable, or if you go drive down the road and think, wow, this is way too dense.
Yep.
It really should be less.
Yep.
And that's our tool then, to have it be less, is as they go away, when they come back, they can't come back the same way. Is that right?
Yep. And then the last district is the R1D. So the analysis is on the bottom of page 91. So the minimum lot area is 8,400 square feet in the R1D, 2,200 total parcels, 50% are non-conforming, 1,100. Pretty much every neighborhood in the R1D has some number of undersized non-conforming parcels. If you were to consider reducing the minimum lot area from 8,400 to 7,200, that would make about 400 properties conforming. If you went even lower to 6,200, that would make approximately 600 properties conforming. The bottom line is that this is where the oldest neighborhoods and, some of the ones that, unless you turn it to 2,000 square feet, you're not going to make them all conforming. So that's not the point here, is to eliminate all non-conformities. So the R1D could be a candidate for maybe reducing the minimum lot size slightly, so that more properties conform, bringing it more into compliance with established. development. So I'm not asking you for decisions, and I think probably what I'd need to do is come up with a creative way of putting this all on a map to help you see some potential changes that would address,
Yeah,
you
because
know,
I'm
these
feeling like
considerations.
these colors aren't matching in some of these areas. These are not these are not R1D.
They are R1D. That is the zone.
But they are not matching other R1D properties that we
Right.
have. Those are massive lots.
Right. So that's a good point. Like,
So,
why?
Why is that one R1D?
So
but
Amanda's
it's not
looking
like
at
the-
a
the
neighborhood
zone?
that probably has 10,000 square foot lots.
Yeah.
And it's zoned R1D. So maybe it's more appropriate, let's make those R1B to conform with everything around it is R1B and probably a similar lot size. So that's something we can consider too.
Yeah, I think that.
Upzone,
Yeah.
you know, if established development has already met a greater standard for minimum lot size.
Sure.
That's a good point. Yep.
Well, this is a really great analysis that breaks it down. It's very helpful. One comment that I have is, I wonder if we want to not have the group homes of more than 6 in some
Okay.
of these more dense districts, because when there's 6 residents, or more than 6 residents, you have the caregivers, more than one caregiver.
You're gonna need an employee.
And if it's, depending on the number, I think if it's more than 7 or 8 or something, you need to have, one employee for each 7 or 8.
It can get, yeah.
And
I
then you
I
have
agree.
families coming to visit.
Yeah.
So there could potentially be a lot of parking that's needed for these. So maybe just in those districts that are, that are smaller lots.
R1D maybe.
Yeah, we shouldn't
R1C.
allow it because there wouldn't be room for all the parking without creating a disturbance in the neighborhood,
Sure.
potentially.
Yep. Just a couple more things I wanted to point out that may generate some discussion here. Is that RM1 district. I just wanted to show you or give you a highlight of the changes that I'm showing in there. So that starts on page 94. So based on the thought that we would consider changing the intent of this district to no longer accommodate conventional apartment buildings, but rather smaller attached units, smaller buildings, looking at some changes or tweaks to the schedule of regulations, such as not requiring a 50-foot rear setback, but a 35-foot rear setback, which is kind of bridging the difference between the RM2 and then the single family. And then similarly, if you scroll down further in that same chart on the bottom of page 95, reducing the required setbacks slightly. Again, if we don't have there's no concern about having a 3-story apartment building, which surely we would want that maybe set back further from the road. This gives us more of an opportunity to have these townhouse style, which naturally kind of work better with the road and being up closer to the road. So a reduction in front setbacks would make sense, given that we would be maybe changing the intent of this district here. Another complicating factor is at the last row on page 95 is that our ordinance right now in the RM1 district, it requires a 30-foot setback essentially around each building, a landscape setback around each building. And so if you had multiple buildings on one property, it's asking for a setback between the buildings, which makes sense. But the language says that you can't use one building's required landscape area to satisfy the landscape area of another building. So the prime example is the one that we just reviewed today. It's a 60-foot minimum setback because one building needs 30 and the other building needs 30 and you can't merge the two. For these units, And again, we're not talking about traditional apartment complexes. We're talking about kind of what we saw today.
So it's more of
I
a
don't-
single-family feel to
Yeah,
it,
I
rather
don't
than
believe
a...
you need that. One can't satisfy the other. It seems like a 30-foot between the two buildings is reasonable enough.
Makes sense.
And I see that double it up as a significant hurdle for new residential development.
Well, in the development we saw today, they either had the option to ask for a rear setback variance or in between the two buildings, which.
We'd rather see
We'd
more
rather-
perimeter setback and less interior setback.
Right.
Right? Or certainly the neighbors would. So, and you'll see an updated intent statement for the RM1 district on page 96. Similarly, for the RM2, with that same issue about doubling up, if you look on the bottom of page 98, the thought was, because the RM2 certainly would allow attached dwellings that are, no more than 4 units or 3 units. Maybe we say for them, they wouldn't have to do the double, but if it's a conventional apartment or there's more, 5 or more attached units in any building, that's when we would want the 60 between the buildings. So I just wanted to point that out, because maybe if you saw it without explanation, you'd be like, what is going on?
There's a lot of pages.
Yeah, that too. And I think that's it. That's all that I wanted to kind of call out to you. The rest you can kind of just look through. Hopefully it kind of makes sense as you do that.
Well, I think the map would be very helpful.
Yep. I'll also say that in the end, there's the definitions, so we added a handful of definitions, again, clarifying some of these terms and how we're looking at it.
And so can you go over what the process would be, meeting-wise?
So, and what I've presented is just, largely a look at the zoning districts and the uses that are allowed in each district. What I still want to take a look at, and we said we would as part of the grant, is to look at the site plan review process in general, to see if there's any tweaks that we could do to make it more efficient or eliminate unnecessary hurdles. Look at required parking formulas for residential uses, make sure that they're in line with contemporary practice. Make sure that we have, assisted living facilities, make sure there is a formula for that. Potentially consider that new residential development option that allows for attaching, but also look at the existing options, PUD, and the open space option, just looking to make sure that these options are attractive to potential developers if they would consider doing that. Coming up with maybe special land use requirements for, say, the group homes, or maybe for if you want an apartment above a commercial building. There are probably some basic requirements that we'd like to see. So I'd want to put those together for you. And then looking at the zoning map changes. So those are things that are yet to come.
So could I ask that you include an amendment to the temporary land use time as well?
Yeah, and there could be some things, and these are things that we've kind of collected.
Yeah.
That instead of doing it separately, we can throw those in as well.
And
So
so,
that was one of the things that we had mentioned from last meeting.
so are you giving us chunks of this in each meeting so that we
That's
can
the plan.
give you some feedback?
Yes.
And then you're going to present it all in a public
Yeah.
hearing? Or will we have another meeting to discuss it all and
So
then?
I wanted to ask the planning commission that. I mean, tonight's meeting actually was kind of convenient that it wasn't a huge agenda, and the case didn't take
Well,
that
it
long.
wasn't, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it wasn't until this got thrown in.
Yeah.
We're still only at an hour and 10 minutes, okay? We're
doing
doing
good.
pretty good here.
We had, in the past, we had taken an opportunity to do work sessions or study sessions that are, of course, open to the public.
Yep.
Outside of the formal planning commission meeting. And I think we probably, if we want to move this along, which I think we probably all do, we might want to do 1 or 2 of those work sessions to do that.
Well, I kind of like that you are giving us small digestible chunks
Right.
over a series of months.
Yep.
And then we can think about it and think about the actual, practicality of them as
Sure.
in relation to previous cases and cases that are going forward, and then maybe have a workshop to put it all together before
do
the
that
public
too.
hearing?
Yep, and if, I can keep providing information, and if that planning commission meeting doesn't happen to, because of time or whatever, we can't get to it, that's fine. So I guess I would ask that you take the information that I presented, look at it on your own, come back the next time we discuss this, and the first thing I'll ask is any comments on what we had talked about last time. And then I'll share the new information with you and go over that, and that'll be our process moving forward.
Sounds good. Anybody have any comments? Okay.
Good.
So moving on, how about item G?
Don't think there's no correspondence for you.
H?
So H, I do have, this is coming from the clerk's department, a liquor license, is this a transfer request? Yeah, transfer request. So if you've been around long enough, maybe you recall having one or two of these come through before. Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances says whenever the clerk receives an application for a liquor license transfer, the clerk needs to share it with the planning commission. The site plan or any other site parking and seating in the building shall be referred to the planning commission for their recommendation prior to final action by the township board. So in the past, as I recall, the planning commission takes a look at the application, they consider what's the property zoned, are there any issues with the site, the parking area, things of that nature that need to be addressed, that we could provide a recommendation to the township board. So this is from Paul Shamo, Bumpers Landing, 31988 North River Road. It's actually, I believe, for the Cruise Inn restaurant. Bumpers Landing is right next door.
Yep.
And so they want to have the liquor license transferred for the Cruise Inn restaurant there.
So they'll be combining the two?
I don't know.
If they are doing that, would that necessitate a site plan review to look at the parking and the?
So when you say
Circulation.
combining the two, you mean the two restaurants into one? I don't believe so.
Yeah, because Cruise In is closing, so he
Ah.
bought Cruise In.
So he bought it, okay. So I don't know, I guess I don't know what his plans are. Does Cruise Inn have a liquor license right now?
Yep.
So is he purchasing that liquor license? Is that
That's what I
essentially?
think is happening.
Purchase the
is he's-
business.
He purchased the business and now
Okay,
he's
so
getting
that's the
It's
transfer.
Cruise
horrible.
Inn's
Yeah.
license transferred to Bumpers, because Bumpers is gonna operate this.
Both of them.
Does
'Cause
Bumpers
they're
have a liquor
connected.
license presently?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, if there's such a thing as a double liquor license, that's what they have.
So
That's what they will have, actually.
thi- there's nothing that I'm aware of, just if Cruise Inn stays the same as a restaurant and Bumpers stays the same as a restaurant in terms of like the footprint doesn't change or anything like that, it wouldn't trigger site plan review and approval.
Correct, I agree.
Now, if they wanted to tear one down and build one large one, or tear them both down and build one large one,
I mean,
Or
they
Yeah,
are
that-
connected.
Or
They are
connect, or, they are, or connect them.
or connect them.
Have you been there, Adam?
No.
Okay, so if you do go
I've been to
there,
the site, but neither, I haven't been.
because Bumpers is operating out of 2 different buildings already. And now this could potentially be 3 buildings. And I'm not putting a judgment on that, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering at what point it triggers.
Yeah.
And parking's always been an issue.
They
for
did
those-
come to us.
Yeah, I mean,
They-
why is this applied?
The planning commission did see when they redid the parking lot, I don't know, 5 years ago,
Yeah,
6 years
it's been
ago.
a while, yep.
They did come to us for, that was during COVID.
Yep.
And he did come to us for the parking lot redesign.
And incorporated the additional docking spaces.
Yes, that is correct.
So Cruise Inn has
reality-
more parking at that, or at least at that time. Cruise Inn had more parking available and there was always sort of a war between them.
But getting back,
Conflict.
right, but I mean, getting back to the root of this basically is a recommendation from us. We're saying, this falls within the character and I guess, you know, of the site. You know, anything to do with any kind of building or anything would have to come back as well. So this is just, again, this was, if I remember, it's just a cursory review. We want to make sure that, you know, it's going to be used properly. We feel that there's really no objections, and just a recommendation to the board that we're okay with it. So if that's all we're looking for, and it needs to be a motion, I'll make that motion. Again, because building is changing, and whatever there's going to happen there is going to be totally separate, so.
That's correct.
So does the site plan convey what you just said? Does everybody feel that it does?
What they've submitted in this liquor license application is not a site plan, it's a floor plan of presumably how Cruise Inn is set up.
Yep.
So this doesn't even show it doesn't show the site, it doesn't show the parking or anything like that.
Okay.
And to Larry's point, we're just asked to consider the site in relation to the appropriateness of this liquor license. And I think confirming that it's zoned properly and things of that nature.
Okay.
It is zoned waterfront. Both Cruise Inn and Bumpers is zoned waterfront.
And it has existed with a liquor license for many years.
So we're essentially just agreeing tonight for the sole transfer of a liquor license from Cruise Inn to Bumpers Landing. And nothing regarding any of the property, any of the use of the property or anything else. So I guess as long as they're aware of it, that if their intent wasn't just the sole transfer, then they need to address that with proper authority, shall we say.
And I would assume if they're going to be doing renovations, they'll need building permits.
Right.
And, Brent, of course, knows when things trigger the need to come to the tech team or planning commission.
Oh, yeah.
These are two separate parcels, right?
Yeah.
Bumpers.
That's correct.
They're connected.
So, I mean, if
Jason.
they connected the two, then they're going to have to do a combination of the properties.
That's correct. And I would imagine he's probably going to open it as a separate, I don't know, I haven't talked to him, but I would think he's probably opening up as a separate business. And at some point, you know, once they figure out how they're going to design it, you know, then they're going to probably submit stuff after the fact. And if they do that, they could probably sell the one liquor license if they, right?
So before they reopen, does the township go in and do any inspections? Fire department's going to want to get involved, right?
So we have occupancy and use inspections scheduled for Cruise Inn in the beginning of April. There is a plan for the two buildings. I had a meeting with Brent and the owner last week. There's a lot to it, so we're working on it.
So more to come, right?
More to come.
So there will
Yeah.
be more to come.
There will
I'm
be more to
looking
come.
at the parcels this building is. Bumpers is partially on the parcel that Cruise Inn is on.
Oh, yeah.
And just for the commission to know, for any change of use, occupancy, owner, anything like that triggers the inspections through the building and the fire department. So anytime any of the liquor licenses come through, we do our occupancy and use inspections.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I think
I
we have a motion.
supported that, sorry.
Oh, okay. So we have a motion to approve, or to recommend approval to the township clerk, and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And then finally, under the planner's comments, I have update on the tech team meeting that was held March 10th. There were 3 cases. The first case was in the industrial district, one of the marijuana grow facilities, a new generator in the back of their building. That was approved. Another case was Deer Camp, North River Road. Wanted to do some limited outdoor seating, a couple of tables along the edge of their building. And then the third case was a discussion only. This is Picaro Building Company, 27430 South River Road, the southeast corner of South River Road and Hazel. It's property that's 2 properties that's presently zoned general commercial. And The owner is looking at doing a couple of duplex units. Or no, I'm sorry, a couple of triplex units. So not wanting to do commercial and thinking that the market would support residential at that location. So the discussion largely revolved over, you're going to need to get a rezoning. And then if you get a rezoning, you can come back for a site plan. But the rezoning is the first step. So he's looking at downzoning from general commercial to one of the multiple family districts. And he has applied. So this is likely on the next planning commission agenda. RM2 is what he's asking for.
Okay,
That's all I have.
thank you. Letter I, comments from the floor. Is there any comments from the floor?
Yeah, C. William Bardell, 28-year resident, clean cut boy next door. Clean up, fix up, people helping people. I just want to tell you that when I looked at this F, housing focused zoning ordinance amendment, yeah, I didn't see it say single family housing ordinance amendment. I didn't see that. This is something else. I was told 20 years ago, I moved here 28 years ago, I was told 20 years ago that we're only going to have 80-foot lots, we're going to have single-family houses, no more duplexes, no more triplexes, no more 4 units. It's all going to be 80-foot lots, 1,400, 1,500 square foot ranches and colonials. Now we're going backwards now for some reason. Do we think this is Royal Oak? No, this is Harrison Township. It's not Ferndale, it's Harrison Township. I don't understand why we would go backwards. We already had a master plan, and now we're going back on the master plan, and we're downsizing. I don't understand what it is. Do we need more? We're trying to get more people in the Lance Cruz School District. This is not the way to do it. You're going to be scaring away money. This is going to scare away money, downsizing the lots. I understand there was one gentleman that, I don't know, he had 100-foot lots, 100-foot lot, and everyone else had 50s. Okay, that's an exception because the whole street was 50. And you could just handle it case by case. But to lower the standard with this multi-family, 4-unit, 3-unit, I don't know what's going on here. This is not what I was told was going to be. No more duplexes, quad, whatever, no more multi-family. We got all the multi-family. We got the most multi-family in Macomb, Macomb County. So why do we got to do it? And I said I was told we're going to have single-family houses, 80-foot lots, 1,500 square foot ranches, colonials, 3,000-foot colonials, la-di-da. Now we got multi-family here, I don't know what's going on here. The other thing I want to comment about is that gas station that somehow went to the board without going through you guys first. I don't know why the public hearing wasn't still open, and now they're going to come back for special land use for this gas station on North River Road. Okay, it's time to do the due diligence of the township now, okay? I know you guys don't get paid a lot of money, and you come in here for a few pennies, but I thought we were going to raise it up, not bring it down. So, like I said, be like if I was hiring an engineer. Okay, the engineers don't know math, so let's take out the math. And so I hire you if you don't know math. You know, you don't bring the standard down, you bring the standard up. Okay? Think about it. Use our heads a little bit. Thanks a lot.
1 second left. Okay, thank you for those comments. Item letter J is next meeting, April 17th, 2025. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye. You've been wanting to do that all night.